Welcome to Vision Pros, the show all about spatial computing, visionOS, and getting work done on the Apple Vision Pro. I'm Tim Chen, host of the show.
When I really back up to 10,000, 30,000 feet, and I think, what is special about this thing that we're working on? This is what I realize, is that we're able to separate content browsing and display in a way that no other product in the category has been able to do.
Welcome back to another episode of Vision Pros. In this episode, we are joined by Adam Lisagor to discuss Television by Sandwich. Television is this awesome app that puts television models in your actual real-world space, allowing you to enjoy YouTube and your own media in this very fun and different way than any other video app has for visionOS. The very first thing I did when I installed this app was load up the Planet of the Apes live-action TV show from 1974 and felt right at home in these vintage TV sets. And if you haven't tried it, I'd really encourage you to download it and give it a shot. If you'd like to support this podcast, you can go to visionpros.fm/Patreon. And by subscribing to either the Patreon or Apple Podcasts, you'll get early access to both Vision Pros and iPad Pros. Even $1 a month on the Patreon goes a long way in helping with the production of the show. My great thanks to everyone that supports the podcast. With that, here's my interview with Adam. Enjoy. Welcome to the podcast, Adam.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it, Tim.
Yeah, thanks for you reached out to me, told me about television, which I had heard rumblings about, and on the talk show you mentioned you had an app coming out with a name by the name of T, had a T in the title, and we now know it's called Television by Sandwich, and
which happens to be a bummer because you can't reorder the apps yet in the home view, so I always have to swipe over 2 or 3 times to use my own app. But that's okay. I'm sure that'll change pretty soon.
Fills out more and more. It's getting to be more and more of a pain to reach the later pages.
How many pages of apps do you have currently?
Oh man, I want to say 8 or 9.
Oh my goodness! Wow,
so I've just been downloading all sorts of stuff. I probably will
you have to
stuff out. Like just last night, it's like, oh, here's $1.79 for this drone. You can just fly around your living room. Let me try this. It's pretty fun. Like there's all sorts of just random,
Oh, I'd love to try that one. That sounds awesome.
Yeah, that one's been pretty cool. I think if you just search for drone, it's like one of 2 apps that are
one of 2 drone apps already. Yeah. Okay, yeah. People have accused me and television of being one of the early, beer drinking apps, the proverbial beer drinking apps of the Vision Pro. But I think a drone app is probably the actual beer drinking app. Or if there's a beer drinking app, I'm sure there will be soon.
Yeah, virtual beer cans. You can just you probably can have beer cans. Apple doesn't. Is there some alcohol rule in App Store stuff? Or
I don't know. I doubt it because you would have to. I'm sure there's wine libraries and stuff that
true.
And beer.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's such an interesting idea. We should find out if there's any rules against simulated alcohol consumption.
Yeah. Because you could do weird things where you're messing with your field of, I don't know, some kind of augmented reality where it's kind of blurring.
That's interesting. Yeah, it simulates different levels of intoxication.
Right, yeah.
Well, maybe in television there should be rules against simulated intoxication because we should abide by the rules of the FCC,
right?
As a television.
So before we dive too far into the rabbit hole, can you share a bit on your background and your company, Sandwich?
Sure. So I started in 2009. Actually, right after the iPhone launched, a friend and I decided we wanted to be app developers. I didn't know any code whatsoever, but neither did my friend. He was a web designer. Cameron Hunt was his name, still is. And we decided to work on an app together that we both saw a need for at the same time, which was to be able to draft tweets in this app and revise them and then publish them from the app. There was no tweet thread reading in the app. It was just for creative writing and then publishing. And it was a very simple app called Birdhouse. So we thought this was going to go blockbuster huge and going to start our whole career in app development. He did become an app developer. I did not. I did not learn Objective-C, but I did make a little commercial for that app. And the commercial was widely appreciated, probably more so than the app was. Although the app did have its sort of like subculture, which was really fun for a while. But right away, I started getting inquiries from real companies making real apps and real software to make commercials like the one that I had made. But it took me by complete surprise. I had a filmmaking background, and I was able to start a production company, a creative studio, back then. And it officially launched in 2010. It was called Sandwich Video, still is. And we've been pushing on the tech industry, telling stories ever since then, and it's been a really fun thing to do. But here's the deal: the world has changed many times. There have been many cycles and waves in the tech world, and we've been able to navigate all of them. But we find ourselves in this strange, interesting time where there's a layer of software being, sort of like introduced to the tech zeitgeist, which in the form of AI. And there's a whole new hardware platform that is a revolution in personal computing, and both of those conditions make it a really interesting time for me to sort of like begin again and start telling stories again and start thinking about product again. So when the Vision Pro was coming around the corner, I just started having all these ideas for apps, and I said, this is what I want to be doing with my resources right now.
Yeah.
And the first idea was television. It was literally exactly what it is, which is put a television in your space and watch stuff on it. The impetus was, or the seed of the idea, when it was one weekend morning. My family was around me, everybody up to their leisure activities. I was probably on my phone, and I sat there in my comfy chair in the living room, and I looked across the room from me where I've got a big wall with a lot of artwork in a gallery formation. And I thought, gosh, I wish I could just put a big, big video screen on that wall and watch stuff on it. And wait a second, the Vision Pro is coming. I bet that's possible. And in that moment, having used the device, I thought that the most compelling thing was going to be to like automatically stick an object to the wall.
Right.
And I even thought, how cool would it be if it could automatically remove all of the existing artwork on the wall, sort of like paint it out, as we say in visual effects, and then just put the video screen, the object, attach it to the wall. What I've since kind of learned, and this was one of your questions that you sent to me earlier, but what I've since kind of learned is that the magic of attaching to a plane or a surface is not all that important to the platform. It's as long as you can sort of like approximate that idea by moving stuff around and getting stuff close to where it would be physically, it's good enough.
Yes. Yeah, and I found that to be the case as well.
Yeah. Sorry, that was a very, very long answer to who are you?
Where did the name Sandwich come from?
There are a few answers. The true practical answer is that when the iPhone was announced in 2007, I got so excited for whatever was going to happen that I got in my car from LA and I drove up to Moscone Center, and I just kind of like stood outside the building, hoping and wishing that I could be on the inside and like watching Steve reveal this thing. That didn't happen. The closest I got was Steve Wozniak riding around on a Segway. I took a picture of him. And then I kind of wandered around the perimeter, and after the announcement, people were hanging around with their lanyards and their badges, of course. And I looked through this one building with a big glass window, and there was a man sitting by himself, a conference attendee sitting by himself, eating a sandwich on a bench. And it was the sort of like the sweetest, most evocative thing. I don't know, for whatever reason, it struck me in the moment. I took a picture. I still have that picture. And I designated that the lonely sandwich. And then I called myself that on things on Twitter and wherever social things I was at the time, people sort of started calling me, in addition to calling me Lonely Sandwich, some friends would shorten it to Sandwich. Hey, Sandwich, what are you up to? So, even Merlin Mann would call me Sandy. And so this became the first nickname that I'd ever had in my life, really. Then when it was time to start that software company to do Birdhouse, the app I mentioned, I called that company Sandwich Dynamics as a joke. And then when that didn't really happen, and instead I started a video company, I called it Sandwich Video. That's the real answer. The fake answer is what I tell people is that the Sandwich is the perfect content delivery device. And because you eat the meal in the package at the same time. And it can be anything. It's infinitely extensible. And people love sandwiches.
That's a good answer.
Thanks.
So we're about a month into visionOS and Apple Vision Pro being in the wide, available to people that don't work at Apple.
Yeah.
Do you have general thoughts on, does it feel like an iPhone moment again to you, or what are your general thoughts a month into this?
Gosh, I wish I remembered every detail of the original iPhone and how it sort of grew into its place in the world. I think that, so I love the Vision Pro every bit as much as I did the first time I put it on now, and it's growing on me. It's not going the opposite direction like I've heard from from a few folks in social media, whether that's just to be contrarian or provocative or whether they're actually being truthful. I love the thing, and my usage of it hasn't diminished at all. But I do think that because of its barrier to entry, it's sort of dissipated from the zeitgeist quicker than the iPhone 1 did. And that's unsurprising, I guess, to me now in retrospect, but I find it disappointing. I don't know why I was expecting this. I don't know why I was expecting that a lot of people were just going to rush out once they'd gotten a demo from a friend and start buying this $4,000 computer for themselves just because they saw a dinosaur. I don't know why I expected that it would pick up momentum more quickly, but I don't know. I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on that. Why do you think it's kind of been a slow burn in this first month and that the energy sort of seemed to fall off pretty quickly?
Yeah. With the phone, it's always with you, right? This is a device that you're kind of like jacking into versus it just being a constant, always in your life kind of thing.
Yeah.
But I don't know, because it is so exciting to me still. Like, I put it on and I just get lost in these different apps and experiences, and hours fly by, and it's like and I have incredible experiences every day with it. It's like it's exciting to me this time.
Yeah, me too. It's very exciting. It's the new way that I interact with most of my digital world. I found probably within the first 2 or 3 weeks of owning it, I think I probably forced myself to use it a little bit more frequently. And then I started to become okay with like, oh no, it's all right if you just do this thing on your laptop. That's okay. Don't try to force this into every single use case. But I still do love it just for doing work. I still do love it just for using as a Mac. And obviously it's V1 still. I'm so excited about 1.1 when I can install that. But even this first version is so powerful and impressive. Yeah, that my love for it has only grown. It hasn't gone the other way.
Yeah. A couple of days ago, I got this top strap from a company in New Zealand. Mm-hmm. It has really changed just my experience with using this for long, multi-hour sessions.
Yeah.
It's incredible. Like, it's I can use the solo band, and then I have this little black Velcro strap that goes towards the front. Nice, wide, soft, and cushy, and it's just wonderful because it maintains the simplicity of putting on the solo strap, just like putting on some goggles and tightening, and then you just have this extra layer on top, and it's just like it's changed my experience with just being able to just be comfortable in the device.
Yeah, same. I got a Velcro strap because I saw that on Reddit. I liked it, but I didn't like that it was a different color.
Yeah,
and then also on
the
Reddit,
speakers a bit. So for movies and stuff, you really need AirPods unless you just want a bad experience with like.
Yeah. I did get somebody also on Reddit, I think, but I probably saw it on Twitter. Showed that you could get this gray Velcro strap that's like it's meant for a CPAP device.
Okay.
So I got one of those too, and that's actually been the game changer for me. That's what let me switch back from the dual loop to the solo loop band again. So now, I've got the comfy solo strap, and now it's like a matching gray CPAP strap, going across the top of my head, and it's really comfortable. I can wear it for hours. I never experienced discomfort, and it just fits into my life. And the only thing I would say is that it really is a solitary device.
Yeah.
And you don't want to just be wearing it all the time in front of your friends and family or coworkers. You really just need to preserve your space. And that's probably what the largest point of friction is so far, is that you really, if you want to use it, you have to sit down and do it intentionally and make sure that you're not in a place where it's going to disrupt others.
Yeah. And it really depends on your lifestyle if you have time for that.
Yep, totally.
Yeah. Everyone's in different stages of life and all that.
Correct.
And something I swapped out my light shield from a 25W, and I did it with Apple's questionnaire, and now I have a 13W. Brings it much closer to my face, and the angles are just a bit different. And ever since then, the dual loop band, just the way it angles it with the new light shield, I've not found that comfortable in any situation anymore. It's it's such a weird thing how the light shield really does impact that in such a great degree.
That's interesting. I've only used my 25W light shield and the thicker cushion, and it works for me. It's comfortable. Yeah. It's what Apple told me to use. So I haven't been curious enough to try another one.
Yeah, it was quite a difference bringing it closer to your face with the 13W, and it's a little bit more comfortable, but it's just different. I don't know.
Yeah.
So what have been some of your favorite third-party apps you've discovered over the past month or so?
Yeah, I was considering this question last night, looking at the apps, and I only have 2 or 3 extra pages on my home view. And I hate to say this, but I just haven't really been bowled over by any apps that I've found out there. There haven't been any killers. There are the ones that everybody has kind of tried. I've tested out the little ones that were hobby projects that people have released. I've gotten on some test flights of, notable Twitter present developers that are trying to do things like split screen with, multiple Mac windows. I didn't really get that working well for me. And I love the Apple's implementation so far of the Mac Virtual Display. So somebody sent me a test flight build for something that they're working on that isn't even out yet. It's called Widget 3D. And I think that as an enjoyer of collectibles, I can tell from your background there, you might enjoy this app. And I'll actually just get in touch with him and ask him to send you a test, or ask if I can share the test flight with you. Because it's just, it acknowledges that you need 2 things that you have on your watch, you have on your Mac, you have on your phone, but you don't have in front of you on your Vision Pro, which is a clock and a battery indicator that you can always glance at. So it's those things plus a little spinning collectible that sits next to the thing on the clock or the battery indicator on the shelf. And there's a small list of these collectibles. The one I've selected is an iPhone. It's just like an iPhone 1 that just spins around and around very slowly. And it's really just you can throw it anywhere in your space.
Yeah.
And it's a shelf where you put a spinning iPhone as a collectible, or a toy plane, or an old Macintosh, or, there's a dozen different things. And then a clock that's always on, and you can look over there and glance at it. And it's it's useful, and it's single purpose, it's functional. And that's been outside of the apps that already existed or the apps that Apple provided, there haven't just been any killer app go to every day all the time apps for me. How about yourself? You mentioned the drone app, which you're having
another
fun
one I
with.
discovered last night, which is just kind of bonkers to me, is Air Coaster, I think it's called. It's like $1. This is an app that originally released in April 2010 with the launch of the iPad. This is a community they've been building for that 14 years of people building virtual roller coasters on their iPad. And now you could experience those roller coasters in Vision Pro. And there's just a bunch of these things. It just boggles my mind that this iPad app is fully realized 14 years later with being able to experience the coasters. I would say you need VR legs because you will get sick.
Will you? Yeah.
Yeah. I would say
that's awesome.
Yeah, but it's such a cool, just like, this is a thing that was out. I didn't even know this was a thing, April 2010, and it's been in development since then. And yeah, it's pretty cool.
That's incredible. Okay, I'm going to try that. What is it called? Air Coaster?
Coaster, I believe. I'll send you a link if that's the wrong name. But I'm pretty sure that's
yeah.
Yeah, if you search for roller coaster in the Vision Pro App Store, it'll come up.
That's so great. Well, so early on when I demoed the first Oculus DK1 for my family, for my parents, I wanted my parents to see what VR is. I put them both in the roller coaster app, of course. And if, that's the most thrilling thing you could possibly do in that stage of VR. I haven't tried anything similar in Vision Pro yet because it's just I haven't thought of it in that kind of way, and I didn't really think that there were any of those experiences available yet. Like Apple is not pushing towards like immersive, they're not even like turning on the web, the immersive web yet, or promoting that as like as an experiential platform. So I was kind of just. My tendency is as an Apple consumer, my tendency is to sort of wait and see what Apple does and where Apple pushes.
Yeah.
And react to that.
And then I was also glad to see Moon Player as an app on Vision Pro. This lets you watch 3D like side by side MKVs and stuff in Vision Pro. So I was able to rip my Blu-ray of Prometheus 3D and experience it in Vision Pro, and that was pretty awesome to do that.
That's excellent. Moon Player, that's a good recommendation. There's also one. I'm a Sonos user, so there's an app that I downloaded almost immediately called Click, CLIC, for managing your Sonos, and it works. It's great. I really haven't used it since I bought it because I don't find myself like using the Vision Pro and also consuming Sonos media at the same, media in the Sonos at the same time. So that crossover doesn't necessarily work. I remember that being a limitation I found almost immediately, which is that I was in the Vision Pro near a HomePod in my kitchen and I wanted to send music to it. And I found that you can't actually do that yet, whether it's coming. And I thought, oh, okay, Apple does not really want that crossover experience. Apple does not want us to experience audio from a separate device yet, if at all. They really want to contain it within this one sort of envelope of a product.
Yeah, and the audio experience is just so well thought out to me. Like, it just you can't mute notification sounds because they believe so fervently in what they've done here. And it might be my imagination, but even transparency in AirPods Pro with USB-C feel better than it does in an iPhone. It feels like they're just disappearing in my ears and I don't even know I have them in sometimes.
Yeah. I think I heard you mention that on the last episode, right? You kind of you got into that just a little bit. That's a subtlety that is really interesting you picked up on. I'll pay attention for it.
Yeah. And so you mentioned the Oculus DK1. I remember my very first VR demo in Oculus at some PAX East, and I vividly remember you're just controlling this knight, and this knight you were battling jumped to my shoulder, and it felt like that knight was like on my shoulder. It just freaked me out. I was like, oh, this is something special even back then.
Yeah. I remember, so I bought a DK1 used, I think, might have been on Craigslist. I brought it home. I thought, okay, what do you do with this thing? I didn't have a PC at the time. I had to build one. I connected it to my laptop, my Mac, my Mac, my probably MacBook Pro. And, Oculus had some sort of a loading app, some sort of a connection app that you could load like a basic scene. And I turned it on. I remember it was nighttime. I was sitting on my bed. I turned it on. I load the Oculus software, and I'm in this infinite grid, right? Just like sort of like Tron. And then you approach, like you can sort of use a button to approach a desk. It's unsophisticated, low poly 3D in that scene, but it was a desk with a can of Coca-Cola on it. And I remember just like looking at that Coca-Cola like I was entering the Matrix. It was, and I forget, you don't even pick up the Coca-Cola. I think you just look at it.
Yeah.
And I thought, this is the future. That was the most mind-blowing thing I'd ever experienced. It was like the first time you hear that modem sound when you're a kid, and it connects you to whatever, Prodigy or AOL. It was like a whole universe had been turned on for me just looking at that low poly can of Coke on a virtual grid.
Yeah. Something that I was remembering as I was talking about the original iPhone launch is that battery pack. It kind of feels like I'm rotating the original iPhone, that curved aluminum thing in my hand. Like strong vibes of that. I was just...
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I love it. Yeah, it's so iPhone 1. I love the shape of it. I'll definitely, run my fingers on that thing and get the nostalgia.
Yeah. So something I was super happy was the Synology apps all work in visionOS. They're all enabled, and they integrate still with the Files app in visionOS, which means using television, I can hook up to my Synology to get all my video files from that right into television, which I thought was just like, thank you, Synology. You didn't make visionOS apps, but you at least enabled them, and they all work really great here.
That's so good to hear. Oh, I'm glad to hear that. Awesome.
Yeah.
For people like you who have like probably a huge, massive media library on a server, on your Synology server, that's so just sitting there waiting to be enjoyed in this new device. That's awesome.
Yeah. No, I was super thrilled that they're all working, and yeah, it's kind of hit or miss on the iPad apps. Like some work great, others are enabled and probably shouldn't be. And
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So any kind of final Apple Vision Pro, just general thoughts before we dive into television?
No, I'm really excited to get access to 1.1 of the OS, because I really, really want to update my persona. I want to see what little extra affordances they didn't get into 1.0 that might be there. I can't even think of which. I want to reorder my apps on the home screen. I would like folders. I would love... There's all these just like little things that I know they're going to get to, but it's just little by little in these OS updates. So I think we're going to learn a lot from this first OS update in terms of the pace of change.
Yeah, folders. I really want to just put all my video apps in one folder, like put television alongside Juno and Max.
Absolutely. Yeah. Which of those is your favorite player? Which like between like Apple, the Apple TV app and the Max and Disney apps, which one do you end up probably like using the most?
The TV app for sure, because I have like a library of like over 1,000 iTunes purchases since back in the day. I've just, so they're all there and got a bunch of 3D stuff, and I like how their immersive theater behaves. So
me too. It's my favorite immersive experience of across every app possible. I love the TV immersive cinema theater. I love it so much.
Because something that bothers me with the Disney app is if you like leave the immersive environment, like you have to do something real quick, you have to go back into the main menu system to the environment to load it back up. It's kind of slow to get back into it. Versus Apple, you can leave it pretty quickly, get back in, and they do the thing where if you stand up and walk, the movie will keep playing in the window, and then you sit back down, and the theater loads right back up automatically. Like it's very well.
Yeah. And how thoughtful they were with the choice of sit in the balcony, sit on the floor, middle row, back row, front row. I just love that. It's just so simple. It's so elegant. It's so tasteful. It's so Apple. And I just want to be there. They were like, a movie theater doesn't have to be, red velvet curtains and spotlights on the floor. It can just be this infinitely wide void, and you still feel like you're in this elegant, epic screening room.
I feel like I'm in like a Dolby Atmos demo room, like one of those sound, like a sound room almost. Like
totally.
Yeah.
I've sat in one of those because I did at Sandwich. I did work for Dolby Atmos many, many years ago. I got to go up to San Francisco. I got to go into their Atmos demo room, and it was like in the skunk works in the back. You would think that it was like this beautiful room. Have you worked with them at all?
No.
Or do you have any personal experience? Yeah, it was so funny because I got like walked through many warehouses to get to this one in the very back. And it was like it had been wired together by, with Radio Shack gear or something. But of course it was this tremendous, audio experience for me when they actually demoed it. But that is definitely my favorite environment. And probably I would say my least favorite environment is the Max one, where like the only immersive cinema theater that they enabled was the Game of Thrones one.
And it's funny, they use plural is in their descriptor of environments in the app, which is interesting.
Yeah, and it's not even sort of rendered well, and it's like I think it's hilarious that people are supposed to watch Sex in the City in that room, right? Or something like that.
And I wonder if they will add 3D content to Max because they're doing environments. It's a proper visionOS app. I don't know. Is Disney the only one that's going to do that? Yeah.
I'm really excited that Apple starts to unlock 3D movies now, or 3D content, because I think it's been waiting for a device like this. I've always been a big 3D fan. I love 3D movies. Like, given the choice between, this is probably sacrilege to a lot of people, but given the choice between going to a 70 millimeter IMAX movie or a 3D, I will always choose 3D. To me, it's more immersive. It's a more spectacular media experience.
Yeah.
And so I'm just so grateful.
4K 3D ever. Like 1080p was where it maxed out for Blu-ray 3D. So this is the highest resolution of 3D that's been available for home release, at least.
It's incredible.
And I'm not sure what the theaters are they outputting 4K, I'd imagine, to each?
I'm sure they are. Yeah. So, I would imagine they are.
And then I'm curious, before we dive into television, your background with visual effects and video production, how do you see, 10 years from now, visionOS apps and Apple Vision Pro at that point, like creating CGI assets and being able to see these 3D objects in that space and blowing stuff up to movie theater size to see what that actually looks like? And does that excite you as a potential?
Yeah, it's such an interesting question, and I hadn't thought of it until you asked whether like the previewing experience within Vision Pro for assets that you're creating for media, whether that ends up being a tool of production. I suppose it would have to be. I suppose it should be. Yes, like if you're creating stuff for scale, then you should be able to preview it at scale. When I was working in visual effects, we would go, if we needed to review shots, we would go to a local screening room with like a big screen and like just rent it out for the hour and look at shots and see how they looked in a giant scale instead of just like on reference monitors. Eventually, the company I was working for built a screening room and, a couple of screening rooms inside their facility so we could do the same. And it was always like an important part of the process to preview stuff at scale. When I started my own company, I never needed that capacity because I'm not making stuff for movie theater screens. I'm making stuff for, most of the time, small screens that are in your browser or whatever. So I never needed to preview stuff big. So it's been a long time since I've been in that mindset. But this is what I am realizing with this tool is that the world of 3D media creation is absolutely going to take flight, and hopefully already is. Whether it gets overtaken by AI is anybody's guess, but we, and the people in my industry of making moving images for screens, should absolutely be thinking in 3 dimensions in everything we do now. Nothing should feel like flat and 2D unless that's the intention behind it. And because we all have this extra dimension to tell stories in right now. So, I purchased a Vision Pro for myself because I'm a voracious consumer of technology, and I was making an app for it, and I just wanted this in my life. But I also ended up buying one for our visual effects supervisor at Sandwich because he was helping me with making assets for the app, for the television app. So Dan, my visual effects supervisor, Dan Sturm, he has Vision Pro at home, and it's, trust me when I tell you, it's not just for making assets for television. It's going to be for working on videos that Sandwich makes, because we are going to be working in the third dimension, now and into the future. I'm very excited for that capacity in storytelling.
Yeah, and I'm curious if Apple will create some Final Cut Pro that's really optimized for visionOS. Like, what does that even feel like, having something that's built for the ground up with this platform in mind for video editing?
Yeah, I'd hope so. There's some really interesting stuff in R&D right now, and we might see it, and we might not see it for a couple of years, or we might not ever see it. Yeah. You never know which way it's going to go with Pro apps. They kind of, like, many years ago, that Pro apps was a really healthy, thriving ecosystem. And then it was, as somebody who used a Pro app, I used Shake as my tool of trade, a compositing tool that Apple had bought many years ago.
Yeah, I noticed that I was watching Lord of the Rings, and that was in the end credits. Like, oh, that's an Apple app that's killed off.
yeah, totally. And it was my everyday. That was the tool that I made a living on as a compositor. And then it was just like end of life. Apple decided to deprioritize Pro apps, and then they made this shift to the Final Cut Pro to Final Cut Pro X. And like, I didn't know what to do in that environment. It felt like a rug pull. So at Sandwich, we ended up switching over to Adobe software, and who knows where we go from here. I know there's other options now, maybe possibly going back to the Apple ecosystem, but I haven't been so tuned in to what Apple does, in terms of like porting their Pro apps over to other platforms.
Yeah, and they're on iPad now for Logic and Final Cut.
Yeah, which is very cool, but I don't think like I'm no longer the target user for that. No. I run a company. I don't really touch the pixels anymore. Yeah. The pickles. I think I did that on Gruber's show too. Yeah. I meant to say pixels and I said pickles. Yeah. It's like a Freudian thing. I just really love pickles, I guess. So yeah, like I would love to see a very cool demo of Final Cut or any kind of nonlinear editor, whether it's video or audio or whatever, in a spatial computing environment. I would love to see what it is, how that works, whether the tactility and the dimensionality of it comes to play and enables different capabilities that weren't enabled before. But it could just be that the traditional 2D NLE tool set as it existed is like the best version of a tool for professional editors to make media. It could be that.
Yeah.
Here's what I will say about that on that topic. I think that it'll be a sort of a touchstone moment the first time you see a film crew wearing Vision Pro in production, like on set.
Yeah.
Whether monitoring something, a director wearing a DP wearing a visual effects supervisors. Right. I think that will be an interesting moment. Like, what are they doing with this technology that is being used to create media that nobody had really expected yet?
Yeah, because right now that'll be rather hard because it's so locked down. You can't use the battery pack to do USB-C into the Vision Pro, like anything like that. Because there's no way to actually like pull a camera rig and pull it inside Vision Pro to have that be your viewpoint yet.
No, you can't. I mean, there's all kinds of screen sharing and
you can airdrop into
mirroring. Yeah, I don't know. I think there are companies out there working on blending 3D assets into live action video production that, I've seen a couple of demos of. That is a really interesting thing because we have that opportunity now. We have the opportunity to sort of like introduce 3D objects into real world space in real time and capture them and, use that, make media with that set of tools. I think it's just a matter of time hopefully before my industry, the film industry, starts to embrace it as a set of tools to use. But we are also a notoriously slow to adapt. Like the film industry is very slow to adapt new technology.
And then I'm curious, 180-degree video. Like, could you see Disney, Pixar, that's all CGI as their Pixar films are, how complicated would it be to make a version of, say, Up in 180-degree where you're filling out the rest of the scene with stuff that's already created in their world? And I could see them using this in some of their theme parks, selling access to that as well as Vision Pro,
Yeah, I love that opportunity. It's going to be very, very cool when it happens. 3D, 180, immersive screen for a story to happen it could be very, very cool. The only consideration there is that Pixar movies and most animated CG movies have a very dynamic, rapid style of editing. That's how they keep it interesting. That's how they make the story dynamic is constant cuts, constant shifts of perspective, constant lens choices, constant big camera moves, lots of speed and lots of action. And that's how traditional cinema, since the early days when the first edit was introduced and, 120 years ago, whatever, that's how traditional cinema has kept up with, adapted to the new set of tools that we have at our disposal. Is how do we make this the most immersive, dynamic experience while it's still constrained to a 2D rectangle? Well, you just do it by moving everything and constantly and unrelentingly. So if that's the new visual language, or I say new, but it's 40 years old since MTV came around.
Yeah.
If that's the visual language of our current media culture, how does that map to a world in which it's extremely disorienting to shift your perspective? Can you marry those two things, or does it have to be one or the other? If you're putting a 180-degree field of view in front of somebody and saying, we're going to tell you the story in this environment, in this format, you can't do 1 second cuts, for an entire feature length movie. You have to sort of pace it out. And that's kind of where I kind of scratch my head a little bit.
So movies like Lighthouse or ones that are one set and one in, long takes and stuff.
Yeah, more theatrical. Yeah, I would say, yeah. And I think that there's a similar opportunity to bring the elements off the screen and into the environment, into the spatial environment of the viewer, right? If it's more of a theatrical experience. In fact, just last night I saw an app that I think that was ported over from MetaQuest, but it's called Scenes with a Z at the end. And the demo was somebody basically an immersive concert that's dropped into your room, where it's a rapper doing a concert in your room with no background behind them, and you can walk around them and you can just experience them as a Tupac hologram. I haven't tried it yet. I downloaded it, but I haven't tried it. I should have before this conversation. But I see that as kind of the future of one potential time, one potential timeline of the future of media is bringing the elements off the screen, off their environmental backgrounds, and putting them in your environment. Yeah,
Disney should release an R2-D2 app that all does is R2-D2 there and plays you the Princess Leia video and other little holograms of R2, right?
Yeah, of course. Perfect. I love it. And it's similar to the dinosaur. The dinosaur pops out of its little rectangle world, and that's the showstopper where people go, whoa! I think more of that. It's just the tech will have to catch up to it probably. But it could just be the world of VR the first time around when Hollywood said, yeah, we're going to take over VR and we're going to be unstoppable. And then nobody made anything interesting. And it was so sad, Yeah,
I was looking at kind of the history of VR in Hollywood, and in those early days you had Alien Covenant releases 180-degree you're in the alien's viewpoint being birthed out of the person. And I watched it again, and wow, is that a low resolution back then? I think it's for PlayStation VR 1 is when this came out for. So
yeah, that's kind of always like
had a VR experience, and there's all these different VR experiences in like the early 2010s, I think.
Yeah, and there were in the indie film world too. They were like bringing traditional cinematic filmmakers and saying, "Here, this is your new set of tools and your new canvas. Now, make it come alive. Make something interesting." And then these studios got all this funding, and then it turned out consumers didn't want any of it. So it all just kind of got discarded.
Yeah, crazy. Yeah, I discovered this spatial video sharing app the other night, and
yeah, I saw that.
One person uploaded a drone footage. I don't know if it's 3D cameras on the drone itself, or they just slapped the iPhone into the drone to capture, but it was pretty cool. Yeah.
Really? Oh, I'm excited about that. Neat.
Yeah. Well,
yeah, I love drone stuff. Like I got into drones is one of those trends that I sort of grabbed onto early, and was hacking stuff together before it was all packaged in a consumer experience. Getting the first DJI and then having to hack together your own video capture, your own transmission, your own FPV, and like really trying to experience trying to get at the future before it happened, And I've seen demos of people flying drones around using Vision Pro, and it's an awesome demo. Of course, it's perfect because you get the software. You got the software really large right up there in front of you. You get the video preview right there in front of you, and it's all mapped to your real physical space. So of course it works perfectly. But just like everything in tech, there's been so many clumsy years of like people knowing what's coming but unable to really do anything great about it.
Yeah. The thing about visionOS that just really strikes to me is how well things lock in place. Like I've used PlayStation VR 2 many times to watch movies, and I'd watch For All Mankind in there and all that. And throughout that 45 minutes, I'm constantly recentering myself because the video just like it drifts off, and people that haven't used other systems don't, I guess, appreciate how amazing it is. Just like it's locked in there, and you can just walk around.
Yeah,
it's there.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. I wish everybody who uses the Vision Pro had used all the other systems in the past to know how far we've come and how big of a technical achievement this is.
Yeah. So let's jump into television. So
please.
Elevator, just 30-second pitch about what this app is.
Right. Okay. Television is an app where you can select from a library of TV sets that exist from going back through the decades, from the 40s all the way up through modern times with a flat screen or something that looks like a Samsung frame with a nice clean wooden bezel. And you can put your own media on it and watch your own media, or you can watch YouTube. You can browse YouTube and watch YouTube videos in it as well. With hopefully, we'll turn on more streams in the future as we get the resources to develop all of that, and adding more TVs to the app. But really, it's just a simple media consumption experience. It's an app for enjoying video in a format that looks and feels more like something from the past rather than the future, even though it is entirely enabled by the future. I would say, as to the question of why does this exist? Why did I want to bring this into the world? Because the experience, I'm a filmmaker, I'm a film appreciator, and always have been. The experience of watching something in a weightless 2D rectangle in a window on your 2D rectangle, on your phone or in your Mac or whatever, it's a different experience than watching something on a substantive screen, even in a theater or on the TV on your wall. And, it's lacking that texture. It's lacking that weight and that substance. And that could be pure nostalgia. I don't know whether it's just like an association to the past. But to me, I'm 46 years old now. I'm Gen X. I spent my days as a kid going to Blockbuster, coming home with a stack of tapes, putting them in the VCR, and learning to appreciate cinema that way. Putting them in whatever VCR and TV set I had available to me. And really that was the textural mediated experience of loving cinema and media and TV and whatever content. I don't know if there's the same texture for younger appreciators of media anymore, but I did realize very quickly that like watching any of those movies in a weightless window on my screen is different. It doesn't have the same punch. It doesn't have the same substance. So I thought, when I had this idea, bring a TV into the spatial computing world and watch your media on it, it was mostly like a thought experiment. Will this feel different? Will it feel different than just like bringing up whatever app's window and watching your media through it? And the answer for me was yes, it felt different. It feels richer. It like has weight. It has meaning that's different.
Yeah, what struck me is, so I love the Apple TV theater for when I'm just going all in, that's all I'm doing. But I've found myself just loving, I'll get a little TV stand, those little foldable TV stands, and just put it a little bit from my chair and pop an old school retro TV. And I downloaded the Planet of the Apes 1974 TV show, one of my favorites I discovered back in high school. And I'll put that in there, a 4x3 show, and it's really something having, like, I think it excels at smaller videos where it's like not your entire field of view, but you're working on something in your notes app while you're able to listen and glance over, and it's just, it's nice, you know?
I agree with you. What I've done is like I'll find stuff that I like maybe used to watch on Nick at Night when I was a kid. Like Welcome Back, Kotter was a favorite of mine. So I'll grab a 4x3 TV and I'll put it in the background, like sitting on my desk while I work. And just the sound and like this, just the flickering texture and image of Welcome Back, Kotter going on over there. It's like so ambient and nice. But also like I will bring that to the foreground and I'll just like watch something on the TV. My personal favorite TV, I think, in the app is like the one that looks like a Sony Trinitron from the mid 90s, like the sort of like the modernist black rectangle or black box, because that was the TV that I most coveted when I was like a younger teenager. That was to me, that was the pinnacle of video technology, as everything Sony was back then.
Was that a plasma back in the day, or what technology was that?
No, definitely not. It was a CRT.
A CRT, okay.
In the mid 90s.
90s. Sorry, yeah.
Yeah, no, like Trinitron. Trinitron in the early to mid 90s was just these like really clean, sharp lines, curves exactly where they needed to be, but nowhere else, and like every other TV manufacturer sort of tried to approximate that look and feel, but none of them got it right because they were all like a little too bulbous, a little too curvy, like sharp in the wrong places. You know, so there was like the distinctive TV CRT look back then in that era, but the Sony Trinitron was the only one who nailed it for me. So most often when I'm bringing up a 4x3 video, that's the one that I'll put it on.
Yeah, it strikes me some of the older vintages, the screen is actually more of an oval shaped, which is just interesting to me. That's kind of way before my time, but
I don't know why they did that, whether it was an aesthetic choice for like space age, mid-century look and feel, or whether it was a technical constraint of the just cathode ray tube technology, that it was easier to display that electronic image on a rounded piece of glass than on a sharpened piece of glass. Who knows? But yeah, I would not personally. I don't find it watchable. Like, you're basically watching something on essentially a circle.
Yeah. If you already use that, is aspect fill? Is it stretching top to bottom and stretch is more left to right? Is that accurate?
No. So stretch fit and fill will both respect the aspect ratio.
Okay.
Like preserve the aspect ratio of the image so nothing gets stretched either vertically or horizontally. Stretch will just take the image and stretch it to fill the entire screen. So what makes this really hard is that YouTube doesn't have any flags for aspect ratio settings. You can't really easily go into YouTube and search for 4:3 content if you want to. It's nuts because
and older TV shows, I discovered they'll upload a 16:9 version of it because that's what a lot of people want. So I found Planet of the Apes, the TV show on YouTube. It was a 16:9 copy with cropping. It's like I got to find a different copy somewhere else.
Yeah, definitely. And I either cropping or letterbox or pillarbox. Like I watch old commercials from the 80s all the time on YouTube. That's my favorite. My wife and I, that's our favorite pastime. When we'd have nothing else to watch when we're sitting in bed, we'll just pick a year and watch YouTube commercials or watch old commercials on YouTube. And I think that most of the good channels that aggregate this stuff, they'll preserve the 4:3 aspect ratio. But every so often you'll find the bad ones that just like, they'll throw it in a pillar box. They'll hopefully never stretch it to 16:9 because that's an aberration, an abomination. But nobody should do that. Sometimes they'll keep the 4:3 in the middle of the frame and then do the thing where they like blur out. They'll reproduce it and blur the sides for the background. I just think I don't know why the default state wouldn't be to preserve the source aspect ratio. And I think it probably has something to do with people wanting to optimize for viewership in YouTube and thinking that 4:3 stuff is not going to get the same amount of views, which sucks.
Yeah, it
makes it harder for us in television.
Because we're in a world where the iPad's 4:3 and I don't know.
Right.
Yeah. There's more than just widescreen. And YouTube especially, it seems like you're playing it at a window versus maybe filling an entire computer monitor.
Yeah. But I'm really excited because the television 1.1, we released our YouTube implementation, which works great. It's an in-app browser, like an in-app YouTube browser for selecting your media, playing it on the TV. But television 1.2 that we're just submitting to the App Store today, we made a Safari extension. So you can just be browsing on YouTube in the Safari app. If you have the extension enabled, there's a little button below the video, watching television, and it'll just send it out.
That's great.
Yeah. Also, you can take any YouTube URL and replace the HTTPS with television, :/ and it'll send it out to the television app. That's just like a manual hack.
Have you does drag and drop work in 1.2? Like Juno added a drag and drop, so you can just drag a messages thing into their app.
Oh, that's very cool. No, we haven't. Okay. We haven't explored that. I don't want to just like steal features from Juno. Obviously Juno was like their day one with the YouTube viewing app, and obviously Christian is doing a tremendous job with making that app, and like ours is just something different. And there's definitely like overlap, but I don't want to just be like chasing features that right. Juno is doing. Hopefully we're doing some of our own. And I think like the main feature that television has, which Juno doesn't, is like separate. It sounds like a small or technical thing, but it's actually a monumental shift, is separating the content browsing and the display experience. Mm-hmm. And actually when I really like back up to 10,000, 30,000 feet, and I think, what is special about this thing that we're working on? This is what I realize, is that we're able to separate content browsing and display in a way that no other product in the category has been able to do. If you think about, just take the Apple TV or any smart TV, for instance. If you're watching a piece of content on your TV, on your wall, you're also browsing the media in that display at the same time, right?
Yeah.
Which is, it's somewhat of a compromised media browsing experience. If you're on your computer or your phone and you're browsing the media there, you're also watching it on that same screen, right? You're having to share this space and have it be double duty.
Yeah, you can't queue up a video as you're watching something else,
Exactly. There's that, and then you can't really treat it as a true second screen experience where in one hand I have my media in its native format that I'm browsing through the library and making my decisions of curating, and then on the second screen I've got my big beautiful display where which is traditionally the best way to experience media. Right? No other product in the category on any platform has been able to do this, to combine it into one piece of software, because they haven't been able to. Of course, it requires two pieces of hardware. Well, the thing is, in spatial computing, you can have as many pieces of hardware as you want, right? So that's what I really love about this opportunity. This is what makes it magical. Is like, this has been the dream of second screen for forever and ever, since the internet came around. It was like people wanted to look at one screen, navigate through their curated media experience, and then throw it to the big screen where they can sit back and enjoy it. And television allows you to do that.
Yeah. The YouTube approach, have you considered that approach for like Netflix has a website, Apple TV has a website? Does this approach work with other services potentially?
Oh, absolutely it does. The only issues that we're facing is like they don't have as robust an API as YouTube does, and you're dealing with a whole lot of DRM getting in the way.
Because like moving a video from YouTube's website into a television model, that requires the API to kind of beam it over versus some kind of easy way to do that for Apple TV content.
Yeah, it's essentially a web view. Think of it like a web browser inside the TV that only displays the video part. And YouTube makes that really easy. God bless them. At Google, they just worked on making this a good experience for developers so that you could have this kind of thing, so that people could build this kind of thing, because YouTube don't care about DRM. No. They're not catering to Hollywood. They're not selling this content. They're making it available for free because it's all supported by advertising. So they want it to be available in as many places as possible. And, you come up with the limitation for us where certain YouTube channels have chosen not to make certain content embeddable in other places. So, every 10th video, depending on the category of content, maybe every 10th video, you'll try to send something, you'll try to watch a YouTube video in television, and you'll get an error on the screen that says the creator of this content or this YouTube channel is not authorized embedding in other screens. I forget what the specific warning is, but it's like, that really sucks because it just like limits. I don't know why they would choose to do that. It's just like, I think it's like an instinct for
it is
being
weird
protective.
Because the ads still display in embeds and stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, the answer to your question is absolutely. That's what's going to make the television app much more and more powerful and grow, is as we're able to unlock other streaming sources and also just other media sources. As I intuit, you're sort of like getting at as well.
Yeah. Because the challenge I see for you guys is trying to get the content. Like people are able to download stuff on different websites and kind of throw it into the app through files and Synologies and stuff. But that's the real challenge. And the 4x3 challenge is another one I see is I want Seinfeld in 4x3. How the heck do I find Seinfeld? It's in 16:9 now everywhere you go.
I know, and you would think it would be as easy as detecting that Seinfeld clips, almost all of them on YouTube, are like, if they're 4x3 with a pillar box on the side, you would think it'd be easy to slice off the sides and put it in a 4x3 TV.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, Apple doesn't make that easy. Just in the SDK, Apple makes it really, really technically difficult to change the shape of video in order to use it in a 3D object. If you want to use it in a 2D window, fine, do whatever, knock yourself out. You can slice and dice it and reshape it whatever way you want. but to take especially web content, web video content, like and slice it up differently into different aspect ratios or crop off sides and stuff. It just like, unfortunately right now with this given set of tools in the SDK, it's really hard to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. Disney Plus, I've been watching The Bad Batch, and they have black bars in the visionOS app because I think the opening credits is a different aspect ratio from the show, and they favor the opening credits over the show.
Right. Oh my gosh. Yeah. What an interesting choice.
Yeah. So at launch, 19 different television models from what I could tell.
Yeah. Sounds right.
In the gallery, you're able to say, we have Macintosh TV and all the different names of things, but the actual model of TV, it's Vision TV, and you do not do. Is that an Apple thing, or are you afraid of other?
No,
companies?
That was an error. That was an error, and you're the one who caught that. Like I hadn't caught it because. Okay, so really, I was hesitant. We specifically built the 3D model for the Macintosh TV, which for your listeners, Macintosh TV was a 1993 Apple computer released that was a combination Macintosh and a television. And you couldn't do both at the same time. You had to switch modes. You had to basically shut off the computer if you wanted to turn on the TV, or you shut off the TV if you wanted to use it as a computer. And it was a compromised experience in both ways. It was like a terrible product, but it was so cool looking. It was black, or very, very dark gray. And I remember back at the time I saw it in, somebody in my dorm had that as her computer in her room. And I thought, that was the coolest thing I'd ever thought. Because I wanted both experiences in one piece of hardware. So I thought how fun it would be to model this object, this product, and include it as a model in a TV in our app. I was really hesitant to include any Apple branding whatsoever because I thought Apple might just use that as a reason to reject the app. Yeah. It's like no Apple branded stuff. So we changed the Apple logo to my sandwich logo, my company's logo, which is a little dodgy, I'm the first to admit. But we also, instead of Macintosh TV, it says Vision TV. And then the thing that we didn't do, which was just an error, was we didn't rename the model to Vision TV in the gallery. Yeah. It stayed as Macintosh TV. So then, okay, so it obviously got approved. It's in the App Store. Okay, Apple clearly doesn't care whether we call this thing Macintosh TV. Therefore, I want to honor the object. And so now, in the version that's going up today, it's just called the Macintosh TV. It says Macintosh TV on the TV. The Apple logo is on there. I'm not pretending that it's not an Apple product. Everything else that's in the app is pretty scrubbed of its brand.
Okay.
No licensed things. Everything is renamed. All of the objects are I came up with these names for every model. Nothing is the Magnavox whatever or the Philco. The only one that's very close is the Trinitron, which I cheekily called the Tri-Tip-Tronic, because that's hopefully close enough of a reference, and it looks very similar to a Sony Trinitron. But that's a model that we basically had to do custom as well.
Are the vintage TVs, are the companies still in business?
Well, I don't think any of those are actual vintage TVs that existed.
Okay. They're just
those are just for the most part, those models are the figment of some 3D modeler's imagination. And they put these models on our marketplace like TurboSquid or Sketchfab. And then they made them available for commercial use for very inexpensive. So the first thing I did when we were starting to work on this app, and by the way, I have to mention the team who worked on it with me. The real wizard is Andy Roth, the developer that I worked on the app with. He's an Apple developer, iOS. He is a tried and true genius, gifted, and engineer, software engineer. He made this app happen. I was essentially just the creative director and sort of funded it. And then Dan Sturm, who I mentioned before was largely responsible. He's my visual effects supervisor, largely responsible for getting all the assets into the right shape. So the first thing I did when we started working on the app, before even day one of development, was I went out to the model marketplaces and I bought a bunch of models for cheap and grabbed all the assets, and they are a mess. You could like, trust me, if they look good in the marketplace, like they are optimally lit and like rendered for that marketplace. The second you take them out of that marketplace and you try to do anything useful with them, they fall apart instantly. The textures don't link up. Everything is garbage. Like you notice all of the rough edges and like shoddy craftsmanship. And so like so many resources went into actually just taking these 18 models that I'd purchased that were going to make it into the app and making them actually look good, like look good enough.
Yeah.
You know, some of them don't look that great. Some of them, you can see the low poly parts of the model, but like I didn't want to get too precious about it, especially at first. I didn't want to because that can get really resource intensive to make really, really high quality. I mean, that's why Apple only has like 5 immersive environments that you can use. Because if it were easy to make these things, there would be a ton of them. So yeah, that was the constraint there. And yeah, I think that for the most part, all of those models of televisions are just meant to invoke the era, not actually a reproduction of the television itself. With maybe the exception of the ones from the early 2000s, the 16:9 TVs that were like, you know, like the fancy ones, like the fancy widescreen, the fancy widescreen TV that if you go to your fancy friend's house, they had, you know, with the glass shelves and like the stand, you know, the built-in stand. Mm-hmm. Those are probably based on real TVs.
Okay.
And to me, those hold a special place in my heart because, like, you know, that's what fancy meant at a specific era.
It'd be wild to have a projector mode where you have, like, at my house, I had like a huge, gigantic projector, like hidden under a table type thing.
Yeah.
And it'd be wild.
When you were a kid, you mean?
When I was a kid in high school.
Yeah, I remember those. Yeah, I remember those projector TVs.
And well, no, it was an actual projector, like built into a table.
Right. No, I remember. Yeah, my friend Lane Bacon had one of those. Super fancy, big old lenses for RGB.
I think the screen.
Yeah, totally. Good. Yeah.
But it'd be wild to have a little projector table and television projecting onto a screen.
Yeah, that's a fun idea.
Yeah. Walking in front of the projector and having stuff reflect on you or something. But,
yeah, totally.
As far as the different models, did it ever strike you that it'd be kind of interesting to have like get info about each model with some of where the inspiration for the different things came from? And potentially even if it was from a certain era, like the 50s or something, linking like a news broadcast or some piece of media to that television set to kind of like, here's what this TV was all about back in its heyday.
Yeah, that was absolutely like a stretch goal for us when making the app, is like, wouldn't it be cool if I could pair a piece of media with every model that exists in the app? That would have been my favorite thing to do. It would have just been such a fun onboarding experience as like people install the app and then start poking around to the different. It didn't make the final cut because there was so much to do leading up to the launch, you know? And the very last day I was like, okay, what media can I include in the library, knowing that we weren't going to have YouTube turned on? What media can I include with the app that people can select that doesn't come from their own media library and use to demo on the TV? So my initial thought was like, oh, it has to be something that I own, right? That I have rights to. So let me just pick some sandwich commercials. I even have stuff that's in 4x3 because I made Computer Show, right? Like, which is a fake tech talk show from 1983. And then like we did that. I selected a handful of sandwich stuff and I looked at it as an app experience. And like, I felt shame because this is an app. It was like an ego app. It was like everything was sandwich all the time. I didn't want to call it television by sandwich. I had to because if you can't just name an app television in the App Store. There's already an app called television, right? That's like a single word domain. So it had to be television ... So I called it television by sandwich because why? Whatever, that's something. But then, like, obviously it's my face doing the onboarding video in the app. It's my face on the commercial for the app. And then I'm going to throw a bunch of work that I've done in the app? Like, no, cut it off at the pass. So I took out all the sandwich stuff and I went to the Prelinger archive, if you're familiar, with the Prelinger archive of just like public domain video available in a vast library. Incredibly valuable thing at archive.org. And I spent hours browsing through content that we could that would be perfectly suited using keywords. So I found a very, very old commercial for a wireless wizard remote control for a TV in the 50s. Right? Isn't it cool? I love the feature specificity of the things that you can control with this wireless wizard. And then I found basically an educational film reel exploring how the eye works and how convergence and accommodation work. And to me, those felt like two perfect pieces of content to include, including my onboarding video.
Yeah. No, eyes work was just, this is fun. It's like they were.
Yeah, it was super fun.
And
it's still true. We haven't changed our understanding of how eyes work.
No.
And those are the thing that power the Vision Pro. That's why the Vision Pro works, right?
Yeah. And that's why you probably want to have your content a bit further back and not up close like you would reading a phone.
Right. Which also speaks to one of the other features of the television app when you compare it to other video viewing experiences in visionOS, is that you can take that screen and you can scale it up very, very large.
Yes.
You can take any TV in there. You can, in focus mode especially. Oh, by the way, we updated flow mode so you can actually rotate the TVs in flow mode as well, and you can scale them up and down past a certain point.
Okay. Was the original design to mimic, this is the maximum size of a real-life version of this TV? Was that the constraint initially?
No, not really. It was mostly just constrained by how volumetric windows work in the SDK. So...
because that would be interesting to have a button to resize this television to something similar to what it would be in real life kind of thing.
Yeah, real world scale. That is true. That would be interesting, a 1-to-1. So the one where that would make the most sense is the little 70s portable one with the handle.
Yep.
Because that was a TV that I had because my grandparents gifted it to me on the sly. I wasn't allowed to have a TV in my room. Mm-hmm. My grandparents gifted me this late 70s era black and white portable TV with an antenna, and I hid it for dear life in my bedroom. And I would every night, even on school nights, I would take it out when my parents thought I was asleep. I'd put it on my stomach while I laid in bed, and I would watch Arsenio Hall. Because it was one of the only channels that would come in clearly. So that's why I included that model in there.
Oh, that's fun. One thing would be super fun to do is have some way to partner with Screens or VNC app to use a Mac in the Macintosh TV in some way.
Absolutely. I would love that. I would love emulators. I would love...
Oh, yes. That'd be great.
Just so many different opportunities for introducing content other than YouTube. And it's just we're only limited by time, time and resources.
What's the weirdest TV that you included to your recollection?
Probably the 1940s era wooden one, I would think. That's the weirdest one because it's did TVs ever even exist then? And is that what they look like? It's this beautiful object, right? It looks like the wood feels really rich. It feels like what a radio was like in the 1940s, but mapped to the idea of a TV.
Yeah. Well, I love one of them has a blanket on top of it because that's the thing you used to do. Yeah.
Totally. That one I called Grandma's Stories because it just looked like a TV your grandma would have, and she put a doily on top.
And then some are on like actual TV stands where like most of the TVs I'm like putting on top of a table in my space, but some have their own kind of like stand built in, which is kind of nifty.
Exactly, which was a premium feature in the early 2000s and probably late 90s, which is that it was like hearkening back to this idea that a TV should be a piece of furniture, just like it was in the 50s. Like it should be beautiful. It should be made of rich mahogany, or whatever the 2000s version of that, which was like light gray space age, slightly reflective, sparkly material with glass shelves for you to put your DVD box set of Friends or whatever.
Yeah, and the super tall TV. Is that there for YouTube Shorts, like in all that kind of content?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. So, like, I called that one influencer for exactly that reason.
Yeah.
And it's just the panel vision TV turned on its side into a 9:16 format because, like, it's really fun to watch, YouTube Shorts that way. Like, it's just, you just kind of like scroll through them one by one, and why put those on a 16:9 TV with like very, very large black rectangles on the side?
Have you considered an idea of, as you're browsing YouTube, to have like an add the queue button versus instantly replacing what's on the TV?
That would be a great idea. I think that would require us building our own playlist app, essentially, inside of the app to manage the material. And it would essentially like be its own web browser.
Because you could even put local content in the queue, hypothetically.
Yeah, true. Yeah. True. That's a great idea. I love it. I'll mention it to Andy today.
As you were talking.
So we had a conversation with a guy named Joe who developed a website called myretrotvs.com. And so My Retro TVs has a different URL for every decade. So my 50s TV, my 60s TV, all the way going up through the 2000s. And he's curated a playlist, like a very super huge playlist for each decade and each year of YouTube clips that are separated by categories, like game shows, news, variety, commercials, whatever. And if you go to this website, you can like check the categories that you want to watch, and then select a year, and it'll just endlessly play through those curated clips. And so we talked with him because what we want to do is just bring My Retro TVs into the television app, have it be browsable, same style of content, but instead of like the 2D representation of the vintage TV in it, like his app has, it would just play out to our TV.
That would be brilliant. Yeah.
Wouldn't it be amazing?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah.
I need to find some Jeopardy to watch.
Yeah. Like what year?
Right. Yeah. Are there any modern TVs worth exploring? Like, have designs gotten boring, or are there exciting designs that you'd like to see implemented?
No, pretty much every TV is a black rectangle now with the thinnest possible bezel, which is great. I think like in a way the hardware should disappear because like modern day it should. Like my favorite TV, the one I have in my home, is the Samsung Frame because like
turns into
it looks otherwise like it just looks like a piece of art otherwise, which is great. So we included a frame TV in there. And to answer exactly that question that you just asked me, I thought, okay, what would the TV of the future be? Same thing with the tall one for YouTube Shorts. What is a TV that you could create that would only be for this specific purpose that you would never actually build the hardware for? And the answer to that in the YouTube Shorts context was, let's make a TV that's purpose-built for mounting, tall for watching YouTube Shorts, which would be crazy to do in real life. But what would the TV be of the future if you were unconstrained by limits of technology? And it's just a pane of glass. So we have the one TV that's called Future Pane, which is literally just a pane of glass. Like if you turn it to its side, it's a 1-inch thick piece of glass.
Yeah. And the transparent OLEDs are a thing now as well. Yeah.
Right, exactly. So it's that same idea. And what's beautiful about that is you can float it in your space. It literally is kind of like the TV of the future. Like I wanted it to have like a little bit of transparency to it, even when you're watching video on it. But there's a technical constraint around that, so we didn't make that happen. And in truth, it would probably be more annoying to have it be a little bit transparent. But yeah, that's the answer to that question. Is what would the TV of the future be? It would just be a transparent glass that you could float around in your space.
Yeah. Are there more models of vintage TVs you want to bring in that you haven't done yet? And
yeah.
And what are there multiple processes of building these models? I know you mentioned that resource that you bought from, but is there also a process of building from scratch models?
Yeah, both of those are true. Yeah, like if you buy something off the marketplace, you got to rework it to get it into a format that works well in the app, which is like you basically work with it in Reality Composer Pro, which is one of the pieces of software included in Xcode, specifically for 3D models. And so that's a whole to-do. So, we had to work with 3D modelers to get these models into good shape just to get to use in the app. And then building from scratch, that's a whole other trade, hiring a 3D artist to build the Macintosh TV from scratch. That was like a whole process, just like making assets for movies or whatever it is. That's a whole craft. So yeah, it's quite involved actually.
I also wonder, reaching out to any TV companies, like if anyone would be interested in, like, it's almost advertising for them buying physical version of the TV, and like they'd have assets that you could play around with. Maybe, I don't know.
I would love that. I would love it so much. I just think that, knowing how TV manufacturers work, there would be so many like hoops to jump through and legal licensing, all that. Like I could see exploring it for about 3 days and then like coming up against the first
lawyers.
Lawyer.
Yeah.
And then going like, nope, not worth it.
Yeah. As far as the video that's displaying on the televisions, is there any kind of filtering you've thought of, like turn on a filter for this 60s style TV to make it kind of feel like the videos from that era?
Definitely. It's one of the most common things that people mention is like this, if you're going to go to the extent of having a TV that comes from an era, make the texture of the video look like it has that era. And I love the idea. I absolutely love it. It ends up being one of those features that to me is not quite so necessary because video from a certain era already has a look and feel to it. Like if you go, especially like commercials and stuff, anything that's been digitized from a video transfer, it already looks like it comes from that era.
Yeah. So
like you hardly have to do anything to it to make it like sort of like, what are you going to do except like give it like a little bit of RGB, chromatic aberration or something like that. And all that stuff is very complicated to author and it's complicated to render in real time. So like with metal shaders and like, it's like hard to develop. And like, again, like it's hard to keep talking about compromises that you had to make when bringing a product to life. But that's just like that's what product world is. It's like everything is compromised and everything, talk to the thousands of people who worked on the Vision Pro. And if you're to say to any of them, like, why didn't you do X, Y, and Z? And they'll be like, we put a face computer into the, like look at how good this thing is. Like, yes, there's 100 things that, and it's only frustrating as the developer of a platform because the answer is yes, it should exist. The idea that you had exactly like it absolutely should have that. It's perfect for it. It should look and sound and feel like the TV that it's supposed to represent with 100% accuracy. And the truth is it'll just take a while to get to that place.
Is it my imagination, or I could have sworn that I had a lamp on behind me and I could see it kind of reflecting in the TV screen? I turned that lamp off. It seemed like it disappeared. How much of the real world are the models interacting with as far as lighting?
Well, that's how Reality Kit works, is that it maps Reality Kit is the framework for 3D implemented in the visionOS, so that 3D objects take on the lighting characteristics of the world around you.
Yeah.
Right? So what you saw is true. Like, everything in our vision space has been mapped. Like, that's why the 12 cameras exist. It's always constantly detecting lighting sources so that it can make the things, the digital objects in the space, look like they're actually immersive and present in the space. So you did absolutely see light reflected in the TV. And one thing that we're tweaking in the next version is, like, we're decreasing the amount of reflectivity because it can be a bit intense. Yeah. It could be a little too much
during the daytime. So that's like, oh, I've got the glare issue that you have with normal.
Exactly. I don't want to glare. We don't want to introduce unnecessary, like, bad artifacts.
It is kind of fun,
the experience.
Like,
it is fun. Yeah.
Here. Yeah.
It's fun. Yeah.
Did you prototype any interactions with the actual TVs, like turning a power button on or off, or rotating a knob to change the channel and going to the next thing in your library? I could even imagine like a virtual remote that's sitting on your chair that you can tap or something. That's like,
yeah, I know that is such a fun idea, and file that under like ideas that we absolutely have to do and wish we could have done on day one. But in the world of 3D, there's like modeling and then there's rigging.
Yeah.
And the second something goes from a static object to a dynamic object that has to move, it becomes a whole different ball game. You know,
and
like
visionOS seems like it doesn't want you touching stuff really.
Correct. Yeah. I mean, I just kind of wanted it to be close enough that it invokes physicality, but it doesn't actually like fully get there.
Yeah. I have seen for like iPads, people sell these like Bluetooth remotes that are just for media controls. I can see it being fun to have some kind of way to pair a Bluetooth remote control with your Vision Pro and have a control television. And
that's true. Just
or something like that.
Sit there on your couch with the remote control in your hand. I know there hasn't, just in general in the Vision Pro, there hasn't been a ton of demo yet of like just manipulating objects with your hands. In my experience, I haven't, like, I didn't download the DJ app, so I don't know what that's like, but I do know that just trying to type on the virtual keyboard is not the most fun experience. So.
Now you can do it, but yeah, it's not.
Yeah.
I was imagining you'd just be able to put the keyboard on a table in front of you, but I'm sure Apple doesn't do that for a certain reason.
No, there is an app. There was an app that I downloaded on day one called Table Piano or something like that.
Yeah.
And it was supposed to let you just put a keyboard on a surface. I never got it to work. I never got it to detect a surface to put a piano on. So it's just sitting there.
Yeah. I download that as well. I've not tried it yet. It's just like one of the apps. It's like, let me download this.
Exactly.
The Wonderwall. Tell me a bit about this. And I'm also curious if you've looked into a mode where each TV displays just a miniature, like its own video feed versus splitting it across all of the TVs as a unified image. Yeah.
So in V1 of the app, that Wonderwall, it split up the image into the separate TVs.
Okay.
And that's how it worked. And that's how I wanted it to work. And then as soon as we implemented YouTube, we found that the technical difficulty of getting separate web views to render on each of those TVs was too much. Like, it was a performance hit. It was like very complex. So we opted to just like use that grid still, but fill the whole frame with it as though it's sitting in a retail store in the mall or something, where so the model turned into that. And that was just like a choice of technical constraint. Now I do want to get back to, again, like future roadmap features. I want to be able to display not only the video feed on every single monitor in that grid, I want to throw different video on every screen in that grid. That's where it really takes flight for me. That's where I get to feel like a network executive or something. But I think that's a roadmap feature.
Yeah, and the multiple TV thing, I'm curious. Is visionOS kind of design-wise, would be pretty difficult to have multiple TVs in different rooms of your house that are all syncing the same video, so you'd walk around your house as you're doing chores and just glancing at videos in each room.
Right, and I think that it's such a fun idea to do that, and we will do it. We will. That's like definitely on the like the near-term feature list of like multiple TVs in your space. But I think, the interaction model of visionOS is that you take Windows kind of with,
you kind of do.
You can leave Windows.
You
take them with you. You pick them up and you move them with you. And for me, the Vision Pro has really been a sit-down experience, basically across the board. I almost never walk around with it.
Yeah, and I do walk around sometimes, but mostly when everyone's gone and I'm the only one in the house at that point. Not often. And then one really nice touch I noticed in the regular mode is if you swap out the TV model, the base kind of locks in place so you can swap out and don't need to reposition every time, which is just a super nice touch to not have to be super finicky with trying out different models.
Yeah, that's true. It took some getting there with... I know Andy worked really hard on positional anchoring for the app because they don't make it easy. They don't really make anything easy.
3D content. We talked about earlier, 3D content. You're a fan. Have you considered any way of implementing spatial videos or 3D into this app? And you could even have a mode where it's like the red, blue tinted for older TVs, because I know some TV shows did that back in the day.
That's so fun. Yeah, I definitely watched a few TVs shows back in the day.
A 3D episode, you'd throw the glasses at home. Yeah.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
I remember one with it was a Halloween special on ABC in the late 80s, and was it John Astin who played the father of the Addams Family? What's the original, Mr. Adams in the TV show?
Yeah.
He was the host of this Halloween special. And I remember you could go to 7-Eleven or something and get the 3D glasses to watch this special at home. Anyway, again, V1 of the app, spatial video was enabled. So like you could you could load up your spatial videos and they would be spatial in any of these TVs, which was the most cognitive dissonance like you could imagine.
Yeah.
Watching stereo content in an old-fashioned TV. Again, like we had to switch things around when we enabled YouTube, because the way that YouTube content works and the way that a web view is enabled in the SDK is different from just like local media. So we had to make the choice. And in making that choice, we had to turn off spatial video. So it's like a matter of prioritization. Are more people going to be happy that YouTube is in the app,
right,
or that they can watch their spatial video in the app? The truth is, watching a spatial video in television is a suboptimal experience. Like, go and watch it where it's meant to be watched in the Photos app. That's the optimal experience. So it's, that software or product in general is constantly making choices. Like, do you want to try to be everything to everybody? Or do you need to have an opinion? Do you have to make choices? And we made that choice.
The interesting thing is Vision Pro captures are pretty close to 4:3, I think. So those videos actually would, aspect ratio wise, fit pretty nicely into things.
Yeah, that's true. That's true, they would.
So there's flow mode and then there's the standard mode.
Mm-hmm.
Do you find yourself using one over the other more so, or?
I think probably by a narrow margin, I use flow mode, which is where you can use the TV in a shared space with other apps, versus focus mode, where it's the only thing that you're doing. The reason for that distinction, because it seems like a weird arbitrary distinction. Why would you even have a focus mode, like where the TV is the only thing in your space? It's because models work differently, actually, in what Apple calls full space.
Yeah.
The nomenclature for the SDK is full space versus shared space. And shared space is where any window can share with other windows or apps, right? And that's obviously preferential with an app like television because you want to be able to have a TV on while you're doing other stuff. But there are limitations to how a 3D model works in a shared space. You can only do so much with it. You can't, for instance, you can't do plane detection with in a shared space with a 3D model. It just works like a window that you drag around. So if you wanted to do something like in settings, you can turn on plane detection and you can snap things to surfaces, snap models to surfaces. You can't do that in a shared space. So we have a mode in the app that we call focus mode that is just full space, because a model in full space actually works like a real 3D model where you can manipulate it with both hands. You can scale it up as big or as small as you want. It's not constrained by the limits of a window. And you can do plane detection. So you can snap it to surfaces. But like, I love that mode because it's really fun to just grab a model with two hands and manipulate it that way. I just think that is the most magical experience in a VR, environment like this. And I'm so glad that we get to put that in the app itself. It's just, it kind of sucks that it has to be like considered a separate mode or like that's not a feature, that's a constraint of the software so far. And maybe down the line we won't have two separate modes. If you want to watch I think that's probably where the SDK is going in the future, but I don't know when.
Yeah. And one great thing about visionOS is I was in the kitchen using television, and I have like a toaster oven like table thing, and you just put the television on it, covers it up if it's sized right, and you don't even see the toaster oven. Like the visionOS works in a way where walls can kind of disappear a little bit, and objects in your room can. It's kind of elegant in that way.
Oh, I know. I love it. I love like the only thing that it's aware of is your hands.
Yeah.
Right. The only thing that it'll cut out is your hands. I think that in future iterations of the OS, it'll get really good at object detection, and the OS will become aware of that toaster. And so, like, if you want to put an object in front of the toaster, you'll actually have to put the object in front of the toaster. But if spatially in depth your object is behind the toaster will be in front of the thing. Yeah. Right. Mm-hmm. I mean, that might be cool. That might be a cool feature. It might be, I don't know. I think that is where like spatial computing will level up a bunch, is when awareness of the objects in our space is really like refined. Yeah. Like if it could identify clocks in your space and kind of do something with that, or I don't know. Yeah. Just being able to recognize different things and augment it in certain ways. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I think that's coming too. So the last bit I have for you is about just the file management aspect and where you see that morphing, because currently it can get kind of unwieldy if you add like an entire season of a TV show in this endlessly non-sortable list. So where do you see that evolving to? I think that's probably insignificant to turn on file management, like folder structure in the app. So that's something that I'm going to write down for Andy. Or if Andy, if you're listening, this is a feature that we want to turn on. We want to give file organization for the user's media library, because I think you're right. That'll be a big win. It'd be cool if you had just direct server files access without adding it to the library almost, or just like play this from the Files app, don't even import it. I don't know if that's even technically possible as an option. Yeah, no, I would love that too. And I think that, a lot of that is constrained by the OS. Like, what access does Apple give you to the different file structures? And we'll go where Apple goes. If Apple makes that easy to real-time play a media file from a file's source instead of importing it, then we'll go there. It'll be on day one. But we just kind of we're at the mercy of the OS, unfortunately. Yeah. No, makes sense. And yeah, I'm so curious what visionOS 2 will enable for developers. It's going to be incredible. Yeah. I'm so excited.
Is there anything we haven't covered that you'd like to before we wrap it up?
I don't think so. Gosh, I think we covered it all. I didn't even expect to get this deep, but I'm so excited we did.
Well, excellent. I'm excited to see 1.2 get approved and start trying that version out. And
thank you so much, Tim.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just feel this has maybe been the most like respectful podcast like interview I've ever done, where you, as almost like as a journalist or like the host of the show, you really did that. You took the time and you got in there with the product in a way that I was not expecting. And I'm so grateful to you for doing that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's fun to dig in and kind of like see where I can take it with, what is in the app and where, it could go as well.
Amazing. I think it's going good places, and I'll keep you informed as we build.
Sounds good. Thank you, Adam. And where can people follow you online and learn more about television?
Sure. On Twitter, I'm at Adam Lisagor, ADAMLISAGOR. My company is sandwich.co. The app can be found at sandwich.vision, which is just the Vision app studio that I spun up for doing this and others. And Mastodon, I'm Adam Lisagor at mastodon.social, and adam.lisagor on Threads, and my social security number is I'm just I got you on that one. Anyway, or email me at adam@sandwich.co if you have any thoughts or feature ideas or any feedback from me on the app itself. Just please do get in touch. I'd love to hear from people who are using it.
I was just thinking, you guys need a George Jetson's TV model in here.
You know what? We have one ready to go that we pulled out of the app in the last minute. And it's called AstroView, and it is so Jetsons. It's like light blue. Oh my God! It's just like this bulb that's on a teacup stand.
Yeah,
and it is so silly. There was like a technical glitch with the model at the very last stage where there was a gap because of that curved screen.
Yeah,
like that curved rounded screen. There was a gap that we didn't want to compromise it. So it'll work its way back in. It's ready to go.
Yeah, I was just thinking that. It's like,
and you got to watch Jetsons on it.
That'd be so fun. Well, anyways, thank you so much for your time today. This was a great chat, and enjoy.
Yeah, thank you, Tim. Awesome. I'll talk to you soon. Thank you.
Well, that's been an interview with Adam. My thanks to Adam for his time recording, and my thanks to you for your time and attention tuning in. As a reminder, you can get early access and support the podcast over at visionpros.fm/Patreon. My thanks to everyone that supports the show. With that, I'll talk to everyone again real soon.